bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Rika, the runs also known as Ricky Franson. A great episode for you today. An important episode for you today. Today we have Craig Sawman Sawyer. He's a Navy SEAL veteran. He's also the founder of Vets for Child Rescue, which is a nonprofit organization that goes after child trafficking and pedophiles. He also has a great documentary called ContraLand. If you go on my YouTube channel, you can just search the Ripple Effect Podcast or Ricky Verandas or RV Theory 6. You'll find it. We have a documentary playlist, and you'll find ContraLand there. It's an amazing documentary that really goes into how big this issue of child trafficking and pedophilia really is and the history of it and all this stuff. It's really mind-boggling for, I'm sure, many people who haven't gone down this rabbit hole in the past. He also has a very personal story, something that happened to his daughter. We didn't get into it on the show. His daughter was taken at knife point at the University of Arizona. It's weird. When you become a parent, these stories are so emotional for you that I almost, one, felt bad bringing it up, even though I know he's talked about it in the past. And two, I was concerned about my ability to keep it together while he was talking about it. These are not easy conversations to have, but they're important conversations. We need to have them. If you ignore these issues, they don't go away. So having them and exposing them and supporting people like Craig and his work, I think is super, super important. With that said, also, remember, if you want to support the show, we have a Patreon page. Of course, it'll be in the show description with all the other links. And if you are a Patreon supporter, I'll let you know in advance who's going to be on the show. And I also do a Patreon podcast. So anybody who supports the show on Patreon, once a month, at least once a month, we'll do a Patreon podcast where I send you the Zoom link. I do a podcast with my Patreon supporters, and then I release it as an episode. So we get to connect with one another, and the listeners get to connect with one another too. I also have a merch store, Ripple Effect Podcast, merch.com. Represent some Ripple Effect Podcast merch. You can support the show that way. We have mugs, hoodies, t-shirts, all that type of stuff. And I really appreciate anybody who has or will purchase some stuff and help support the show that way. I'm also on Rockfin. Rockfin.com/Ripple Effect. You'll find my exclusive Rockfin show. It's called Ricky Rants on Rockfin. And if you're already on Rockfin, you can subscribe to my show and help me financially that way, or you can tip the show on Rockfin also. So if you're on Rockfin, which I'm sure many of you guys are, because some of my dear friends who host the Union of Unwanted with me, Sam Tripoli and Charlie Robinson, are already there, and other people I'm a huge fan of, like Ryan Christian from The Last American Vagabond, which I was just on his Rockfin channel. I also have a PayPal account. If you want to tip the show, that will be in the show description with everything else. And also check out Fringe.fm. It's a 24/7 alternative media radio station. People like Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions is there, Grimerica, and the Ripple Effect Podcast is there. You can get the app on Android or Apple phones. You can listen to it on a desktop. Go to their website, fringe.fm, and every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you can listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast. So definitely check that out. Thanks, guys, and I will talk to you on the next one. Peace.
I'm on my path now that fighting for the kids, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, these are one of those topics that are hard to do shows about, but are necessary. And because I think too often these darker subjects, people kind of stray away from. It's this idea of like, okay, we kind of know it's happening, but if I don't think about it, it doesn't affect me. I don't have to. It's almost like it's easier to go on with everyday life, not realizing how evil the world really is or can be. And I've had people on like Whitney Webb who really goes into, deep research into the Epstein story, and I've had Nick Bryan on who did the book on the Franklin scandal, and this YouTuber and researcher Memory Hold's been on, and he did the whole thing about a lot of the research in regards to some of the politicians that are linked to some of this stuff, and it's never a comfortable conversation, but I just feel like the alternative, and I'm sure you feel the same way. The alternative of doing nothing and saying nothing is much harder.
Yeah. Well, I didn't like terrorists or terrorism either. And I served, most of my military career as a counter-terrorist because I thought, man, what kind of warrior am I if I don't go after the guys that are going to ruin the peace and freedom that we have here? Everything that I really want to spend my life doing and enjoy is under threat. And I see child trafficking the same way. And you're right, man. It's a repulsive topic, and I'm swimming upriver, brother, trying to alert the people to the threat so that they can, we can all collectively change the culture and safeguard the children from it. But man, it's, people don't want to know, a lot of them. And, but I just can't quit because of that.
So let's get into some of your history. What led you here? I like sometimes getting just kind of a background on you as a person. Who is Craig? What led him to want to join the military, and then eventually, take this journey, and what led you to this chapter of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up in Southern Texas, man. And, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that was a place for, a lot of Navy SEAL snipers came from Texas. And we were always outside. It was an outdoor lifestyle, riding bikes, fighting on the playground and playing football. And, we used to go find Coke bottles and take them to the grocery store and get the deposit back on them, and then take that money, go to a garage sale and buy a used Boy Scout uniform and rip all the colored patches off of it and have a set of Army OD green uniform that's with, as little boys ambushing each other in the woods, with our pop guns. We would wear these Boy Scout uniforms, and that's the kind of thing, rough and tumble boyhood. And then went off to the Marine Corps when the oil recession hit there in the early 80s. And I thought, man, let me just go the adventure route since the economy's kind of dying here around me. And so I went in the Marine Corps to go into force recon, and they didn't have much budget or political backing for that at the time. They said, man, you should have gone to the SEAL team. They're the ones with all the, the missions and the political backing and the budget to go really do things. They got all the toys. I'm like, well, how do I get there from here? And they said, well, you can't. And I said, okay, well, watch me. So I got all the way out of the Marine Corps and into the Navy, and went to BUDS and went to SEAL team, and got picked up for DevGru after that. Served at the highest level counterterrorism operation for the rest of my career there. And we don't talk about that for good reason. And then I did 5 years of federal law enforcement to try to slow down and start raising our kids. Once, mama said, we got baby on board. She's patting her belly. We got a baby coming. I'm like, okay, it's time for a downshift in my deployment schedule, because I was going about 300 days a year as a SEAL. And so I tried to stay home more as an air marshal, and then ended up leaving the air marshal service. I blew the whistle on a high-ranking government crook, and they did fire him for exactly what I'd reported him for: gross mismanagement. He was a SES level executive from the top of the FBI that had come to the air marshal service after the FBI had run him off. And so I did the right thing blowing the whistle on him, but it was expensive career-wise because he was very well protected, as all high-ranking crooks are. And so I left the Air Marshal Service, left everything behind I'd ever worked for at that point, and started doing high-threat mobile security for the Department of State, for other intelligence agencies that we don't talk about in the war zones, moving their high-ranking officials around. And then got into film and television after I realized I was still deploying too much. and our children were kind of growing up without me to an extent. And then I'm like, I'll do film and television. That way I'll be home a lot more. Ended up in South Africa running counter poacher operations for a new Animal Planet series. And so Rhino Wars, we did that. And then I'm like, okay, I gotta do better at this. And I've been home for 6 or 8 years now, much more deliberately, and stay home a lot more, raising the kids. And that's been good. But 4 years ago, we officially started Vets for Child Rescue, and I'd be happy to chat on that and answer any questions. I don't want to just keep talking and run the floor, though.
No, it's okay. People are used to hearing me talk, so it's nice to hear a different voice. So, Vets for Child Rescue, how did that come about? What gave you the idea of getting into this and whatnot?
Well, the concept of filming a problem, a large scale problem, to get the public involved occurred to me when I was involved in Rhino Wars over in Africa. It was the South African Special Forces veteran who was a film producer that came up with the idea to bring Americans over to South Africa and run the operations and film it for a series so that we could alert the entire globe to the nature of that problem, because we were losing the last of an endangered species that was an estimated 50 million year old species, the rhino. And so I thought that was a smart plan after he convinced me of it. First, I thought, you don't want to film our operations. We're going to go crack some heads and get rid of some poachers and save the day for these endangered rhinos. And he goes, no, you got to realize that if we share it with the world's population, we can gain a lot of financial support to help safeguard the animals, and stronger legislation, stronger political pressure to do something about the poachers and make it a stiffer penalty. I'm like, okay, that actually makes sense. So let's do that. Well, fast forward several years after that, a friend of mine from the CIA told me, and he had grown up in the same area just north of Houston that I had. And he said, Craig, this area is the epicenter of child sex trafficking in the United States. And he began sharing with me what it was like. And I'm like, but that's so counter to our culture here. I don't understand that. How can that be here? It's like somebody walked up and slapped me in the face. It's like an Al Qaeda training camp moving in across the street. I wouldn't have it. I couldn't have it. I'm like, that's not okay. And so I started thinking about what I could do as a civilian now. I'm not, I don't have my own helicopters and all this. I'm not some retired wealthy philanthropist. What can I do as a busted up veteran with a broken heart for the children and the will to fight, to do something? I realized that exposing a problem to the American populace was what was needed most, because the people can't fight what they don't know about. They can't fight a threat that they're unaware of. And any covert operation is undone when it's compromised, when it's exposed. The element of surprise and the secrecy is lost. And so that's what I wanted to do against child trafficking. I wanted to ruin it. I wanted to take away the cloak of secrecy that it's allowed it to grow into the $38 billion a year criminal enterprise, the fastest growing criminal enterprise on earth in the continental United States. And so by exposing it, I knew that I could basically recruit 320 million fellow American citizens and say, look at this nightmare. Look at what's been done to the kids. Let's all change legislation. Let's change education. Let's change our culture to counter this plague, this attack. And I realized that a documentary was the best way to ignite that public awareness. So I set out raising the funds to film ContraLand, a documentary that we can chat about a little bit more. But that was the genesis of it.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that politics and money only comes when you have enough. Just like, even they should look at the issue like this is an issue that needs attention regardless if there's a lot of public knowledge of it or support of it. Like it's unfortunate that most politicians, they only care about basically getting votes. So if you get enough people who care about the topic, then they finally do something. You saw it with what is it, the SeaWorld documentary? What was it, Blackfish or something like that?
Yeah,
They,
yeah,
like, it took a documentary. And I also think that there's, like you said, there is some power in film. When you see people talk about it, when you see the faces, you hear the stories, you can connect with the people. I think that, yeah, I mean, it emotionally gets people involved and they want to do something. If not, then it's just this thing that exists, but we don't know where, and we don't know who. And it's like the Epstein thing. That's why the Epstein story, in a way, I was glad, because his name was normal in our. I can hear my kids in the background. In it was normal in most of our vocabulary, and we would talk about this, and people would just call you a conspiracy theorist, and this isn't a real issue. And then once it became public knowledge and people accepted it as a issue, I was kind of surprised how quickly people just like forgot about it and moved on. Like, it was like, okay, yeah, the political elite and politicians and the most powerful people in the world could be linked to child trafficking, and we're just moving on, like, like the world's okay, and it's not a big deal.
yeah. I think we've been conditioned to do that. The average American citizen is so stressed, and there's everybody wishes they had more time and more resources, and people are stressed. They come home at the end of the day, they want to relax with whatever time they have, visit with their family, and kind of go to bed. And a lot of people feel like they don't have much ability or say to do anything. And I think we've been conditioned to just put up with these types of abuse. And sadly, there's a large and growing segment of our society that wants to normalize this type of abuse and call it just another sexual preference. But that mindset does not take into account the victim, doesn't consider the child. The child's frontal lobe and outer cortex of their brain are not fully developed until the ages of 23 to 25. Scientists are learning now. So a child cannot advocate for themselves against a predatory adult who wants what he wants or she wants from that child. The child doesn't know how to put up a proper defense and keep from having that happen. And it's a dark and ugly trade. People don't want to know about it. Heck, I don't want to know about it. So no wonder people turn away from it and go, man, can we talk about anything else? But the problem with that turning away is that's how we got here. And God forbid it was you or me that was in that dog kennel to be taken out and raped, and put back in again. And the only time you're coming out of that closet or that dog kennel is to be raped and tortured and abused and put back in. That breaks my heart. That's not how life is supposed to be for anybody. And I just can't turn away from it. And I as a warrior, I get frustrated with American citizens for turning away and going, I just can't. I'm like, well, how convenient, because what if it was you in that kennel? What if it was you locked in a room and you knew he was coming again, or they were coming again? And how many times per day, and the unthinkable was going to happen to you? Wouldn't you hope and pray somebody was working on doing something to rescue you or to stop this problem from happening to millions of other kids to follow? We can't sustain this industrial scale abuse as a nation and survive. I'm sorry. It just spiritually, morally, ethically, everything, the wheels will fall off the bus. I mean, we just can't sustain that level of evil and abuse. It just doesn't work, man. It's destroying our next generations.
For people who don't know, how big of an industry is this, and also primarily, who are some of the people who are involved in this? Because like, as you know, it's not Mexican, it's not, people think it's primarily foreigners, but obviously America's a huge market and a huge place for these issues.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to cover. Essentially, you cannot judge a book by its cover. You can't pick out a pedophile in a lineup necessarily. So there's not a look. and you cannot determine that a particular group of children or type of child is immune from this, because none of them are. They're the wealthy pedophiles. They're the elite pedophiles that have a lot of resources, if the finances and the power to essentially order whatever product they want. They can order children of any type, and they do. They request children that look specific ways. They order children of all different colors. None are immune. And there's gutter pedophiles that will rape anything they get their hands on. There's gangbangers now that used to just sell dope and guns, sell children now, because they realize that financially they can make more money repeatedly selling a child than they could selling dope before. And you got the Mexican drug cartels selling them. Now, oddly, I've heard of 2 Mexican drug cartels out of the list of them that actually will not traffic children. Because I still, as ruthless as they are, burning people alive, beheading people and things like that for their drug trade and torturing people to death for power, the 2 of them won't sell children out of an ethical, a moral stance that they have. So even the ruthless Mexican drug cartels, some of them have a stronger moral ethic than a lot of our politicians and pedophiles here in the United States. So it's any and everybody. It's a 38 to $50 billion a year criminal enterprise, selling children in the United States. So if you think about it, that's bigger than all pro sports combined. So people look at the NFL and like, wow, that's a giant industry. Yeah, it is. But so is Major League Baseball, and so is the NBA. Look at all the millionaires that come out of that annually, and all the owners and the stadiums and all that. You add up all pro sports combined, and selling children inside the United States is generating more revenue than all of that. So it's not some small thing. It's not just, a petty crime. It's a major industrial scale crime, and it destroys the children. And I could make everybody that listens to this cry if I started recounting some of the stories of the babies who are having their diapers taken off to be raped, of the girls that are raped until they pass out and they wake up in a pool of blood, or girls that have to hear their sister being raped on the other through the wall every night. It just breaks my heart. And I don't want to go into a lot of the story and gore, but I just thought I'd touch on a couple of those things, because that's the type of thing that I hear all day, every day. And these kids are not okay. The trauma lasts a lifetime. Even if the predator gets caught, he'll get X number of years in prison if he gets convicted. Now, soft judges or corrupt judges is another problem that we have. But even no matter how many years he gets sentenced, the victim gets life, because that trauma is never gone. Sometimes they get healing through really quality equine therapy or counseling and different, spiritual healing and things like that really are very, very beneficial. But man, you just, as a nation, you can't have this happening. We just can't, man. So it's got to be exposed, just like cancer. We have to know about it. And just like any sort of a wound, you have to expose the wound and clean it before it has any chance of beginning to heal. We've got to treat the problem. We can't turn away, because it's only getting worse.
Yeah, the mental aspect of it, the psychologically, what it does to you, the trauma, it can't be understated, because physical wounds, most of them eventually heal. Mental wounds, like you said, they're with you forever. Obviously, you being in the military, I'm sure many people who have dealt with PTSD and all these things, and you're never the same again. You're not, they've taken your ability from being sane or normal or not having some type of issues that you can't get away from. And so yeah, even if you do capture the person, you're a victim forever, and it's in some cases impossible to put that aside. And but one thing that in your documentary I thought was really interesting, and I think was also very important, you guys talked about the 1948 book by Alfred Kingsley, uh, sexual behavior in the human male. It was funded by the Rockefellers. In many of these podcasts, when we talk about evil people and how things got all fucked up, who funded it? The Rockefellers. It seems like it's a common theme, when you look at the medical industry in so many cases. And it was supported by Planned Parenthood and whatnot. And then there's also, you guys talk about NAMBLA, which is the North American Boy Love Association, or something along those lines. I mean, these are real organizations. These are, at one point, and this is why I always say science, people like to think like science is the final say, but science is very subjective. Science is constantly changing. Science is sometimes manipulated. You look at that Alfred Kingsley's book, that was considered science. That was considered
it still is, Ricky. Yeah.
Right.
Alfred Kinsey is celebrated in universities as the father of the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
And the Kinsey Institute is still the recipient of millions of dollars in tax money and private grants and donations. And we need to expose it because of the cascading avalanche of harm that's happened to children from the sadomasochistic pedophile who was Alfred Kinsey, masquerading as a scientist. He falsified his studies to get the outcome that he wanted. He was a sick man. His own genitals were destroyed, mutilated due to what he preferred sexually. So he was a very sick man, but he wrote the studies to read the way that he wanted them to, so that he could feel normal and good. And he wanted to try to change our society so that what he was celebrated as normal and good, but it's not. And it's not mean-spirited to call it what it is. The victims are absolutely destroyed, and it's not okay to rape them and say that it's just another sexual preference when it is so demonstrably harmful. So my whole thing, Ricky, is with Kinsey is it needs to be exposed. We need to take an honest, morally courageous look at it and say, look, we see that it was falsified. Let's go back and replace it with genuine, real science. And what things really are, let's call it that. And let's raise our children that way instead of trying to pervert them and condition them for adult rapists from that. Now that they're kindergartners, they're trying to sexualize kindergartners and put all sorts of perverted acts and things in the children's heads that never come out. And it defiles the child. And the Bible is very specific about what should happen to people that do that. It's not a good thing. So I think we're really screwing up. We're screwing up spiritually. We're screwing up morally and ethically by destroying our own offspring. Even any sort of wildlife. If you try to reach in and grab the cubs of any wild animal, you're going to draw back a nub, man, because that mama is going to give you teeth, horns, and claws, right? She's going to protect her little ones. Well, why aren't we that way? Why are we offering up our children to be perverted at 5 years old now and taught every manner of sexual deviance and deviation that they have no business or interest in until much later on? Only so that they're ready for it, so that when the perverts get access to them, they're easy prey. So we just have to find our moral courage and stand up and say, I'm sorry, the line is drawn in front of the children. Leave the children alone. They have no business in your sex life, no matter how you're wired. If you're a sick individual and you're drawn to children, well, the children aren't wired that way. So we the rest of us healthy minded people have to just simply defend the defenseless. And it's really as simple as that. That's the compassionate and genuine and morally decent thing to do, is defend those who can't defend themselves.
You ever hear the story of I think there's a documentary made about the story called Dr. Money and the Boy with No Penis, and it was about this child that something happened. I don't recall exactly what happened that led him to lose his penis after birth. It was something that went wrong. I don't know if maybe they were trying to circumcise him, something like that. But regardless, the parents obviously were traumatized by the whole situation, and they run into, and this is his real name, Dr. Money, who had this sexual research. He had this philosophy that gender is just made up. It's a human construct. It has you can just, the best thing for the kid's psyche would be to just tell him he's a female, and he'll never know, and he'll be okay. Well, this poor child eventually grows up, um, realizes something's not right, something's wrong with him, and of course, like unfortunately, like a lot of these tragic stories, he ended up eventually committing suicide once he realized he was lied to, and those type of things.
So many of them do.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite common, you know. And I've said this. Actually, I was talking to Whitney Webb and Ryan from The Last American Vagabond when I last time they were both on the show, and I was talking about how you don't let kids, like if you ever see a shitty tattoo on somebody and you say, "How old were you when you got that shitty tattoo?" It's always like, "Oh, it was my first tattoo. Yeah, I shouldn't have got it." Or, you know, you always regret the stuff you do when you're in your teens, and you know that like you make some poor decisions that eventually you're going to regret. So, not to get too off topic, but it's kind of similar and it's kind of related. The whole gender thing, it boggles my mind as a parent. I have a 4-year-old girl and a 5-year-old turning 6, a boy, and we're supposed to be guiding them through life, helping them. Okay, I understand wanting to help your children, and if they truly believe that maybe they want to be this or want to be that, but in so many cases, to give your kids hormone replacement or any type of surgery that is permanent, they'll never be the same again, at an age when you're changing, the way you dress and what type of music you like from season to season. You're still developing who you are as a person. To me, is crazy. And like you said, in many cases they regret it. In many cases, just like they regret the tattoo, they regret it. And to me, like, I truly believe there's some true believers that honestly think I think their heart's in the right place, and they truly just want to help these children. But you have to be logical, and you have to think like this child. There's a reason why we don't let children decide if they can drink or not, or buy cigarettes or not, or vote, or so all these reasons. All the things we don't let children do is because we understand they're still developing. They're not
Bingo.
intelligent enough to make those decisions. So why the fuck would you let them decide what gender they're going to be? Like, to me, it's crazy. And I know it's like a touchy topic, but that's something I never stray away from on this podcast, is touchy topics. I think people do need to openly discuss these things, and fuck censorship. I don't really care if people get upset. I think the only way you fight bad ideas is with good ideas. Put everything out on the table. I'm more than happy to discuss any topic, no matter how controversial, and then we share our opinions. And so, even these topics are so emotionally driven, where people will pigeonhole you and think they know everything about you because of your one stance on one issue. And it's like, no, let's just talk about the issue. Let's just talk about the facts. Let's talk about the logic behind this, and don't think I'm this type of person or that type of person just because of my opinion on this one issue. We have to talk about ideas.
Yeah, look, I wanted to be Batman when I was 9 years old. Should my parents have whisked me off to the surgeon to have bat ears and wings sewed on me? I mean, you said it, and I said it too earlier. Is their brains are not fully developed yet. They have no business making permanent life decisions or alterations until their brain is fully developed and they know who they are and what they want to be. And usually you figure those things out when you get out there and you live life. You begin traveling, you meet a lot of people, you begin working, paying taxes, you begin dealing with the things that cause you to understand how things work. And that's what wisdom is understanding how things work. And from that, you make your decisions on what you want. So anybody that would whisk a child into a surgeon to start mutilating the child's body to change it is horrifically misguided. No matter what, if their heart may be good, they're criminally negligent for not understanding so many of the basic principles of common sense and science. That should be illegal to do any sort of surgeries like that on a child. They're just not they're not developed yet. So that how can they know?
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
I
And
mean, we changed so much in those years, you know?
oh, absolutely. And as parents, we're supposed to protect them from themselves sometimes. You aren't just supposed to give them whatever they want all the time. I mean, I'm not a big fan of rules. You know, I've growing up, I was never a big fan of rules. I always like to go against the grain a little bit. You know, like you were talking about music initially. I'm Portuguese. I was supposed to be playing soccer and doing good in school. Instead, I was doing bad in school and playing in a metal band and skateboarding and BMXing, and I was doing everything against the grain. And so yeah, I mean, it is one of those issues that it's hard to talk about, but you know, you kids are finding themselves at those ages. They're still figuring out who they are, and they're going to change a lot. I mean, even as adults in our 20s, sometimes we look back, you know, 10 years ago, like, I can't believe I had that haircut, or I can't believe I thought that looked good, or you know. So it's to me, yeah, it's mind boggling. But another thing that I want to get, I actually wanted your opinion on. Obviously, child trafficking, like you said, is a huge industry, and I'm sure. Have you ever watched that documentary or read the book Missing 411?
Mm-mm.
Oh, so it's about like in these national state parks, how many kids go missing in these state parks? Like a ridiculous amount, nowhere to be seen. And this guy who I believe he was a state park officer or something like that. He came out and kind of exposed the fact that there's no records, there's no way of going back and investigating it. They don't keep any records of any of this. And to me, it was always fascinating because I understand how big this child trafficking industry is, and I'm like, what a great place to go grab kids, because there's no record and people just assume it's an animal. And but there's all these really interesting stories of, like, you know, not looking like no blood, not seeing any struggle, you know, all these type of things. So you know, who knows? I mean, I just threw it out there because it was a really interesting book and documentary, and then I was just curious if anybody's ever looked into possible connections to that, because I guess that will lead to my next question. Where are these children getting picked up? Where are they? You know, like you said, is it the average kid can, you know, on in a suburb, could he be a victim? Where is most of this happening?
Well, runaways get picked up a lot. And it's interesting that you mentioned state parks because, you know, I grew up camping and playing in a state park. Some of my best life experiences are just canoeing and swimming and hiking and fishing at this state park. It was in Huntsville, Texas. We used to go to Huntsville State Park. It was beautiful. And I just visited it recently with my sister. So many fantastic memories. And now I shudder that you mentioned that so many children go missing from that, because I could see how that could happen. And even my dad was a pastor. But he didn't want me terrified. But even back then, he instilled in me, hey, look, um, you got no business getting in the vehicle and riding with anybody you don't know, and nobody has any business dealing with your, seeing your privates or anything like that, And so, I knew that there were kidnappers, and so I knew to be aware of that. But I'm just glad nothing happened there. But a bigger thing than even the runaways. A lot of runaways, they'll go to places where there's public transportation. They're looking for food, shelter, transportation initially. And the predators know this, and they know the places. And there's almost always a predator there ready to approach the runaway and say, oh, hey, yeah, we got a little group here. We take care of each other. We got food and shelter, and we're kind of a little tribe, a little group of us, and you can hang with us. And it starts off just being friends, survival mode. And the next thing you know, it starts to be slowly, after a period of weeks, broken to the runaway that, oh yeah, well, we all kind of, work and do things to scavenge to help fund ourselves so we can eat. And then next thing you know, it begins to eventually get told to the runaway, oh yeah, well, you're going to entertain this guy tonight, just show him a good time. And she's ended up, or he is being raped for money. And that's one way. But bigger than that is child protective services. up to 88% of the children being sold outright like a piece of meat and destroyed in the United States is said to initially come from Child Protective Services, which is a state-run organization. And they'll often target a young single mother who may not have legal means or not know which legal means she has available to her. And CPS can go in there and show a force. We're the legal authority, ma'am, and you're not. And we see this child's nose looks dirty. That one looks a little thin. We deem you an unfit mother, and we're taking your children. And tragically, a lot of times that's the last she sees of her kids. And the kids go into foster care system. Some families loving, some families abusive. And then after a number of handoffs, the children end up going off the books completely. Nobody knows where they went, and they're a black market item, and they're raped and tortured and killed and left somewhere, disposed of, who knows how. But that's a big problem. So we've hired a full-time program manager for our investigations program at Vets for Child Rescue now. He's a 31-year retired agent from a federal law enforcement agency with 31 years as a federal criminal investigator, and been part of numerous joint task forces and so forth, and the U.S. Army before that. And we've vetted 23 more criminal investigators retired from every which agency, and 30 analysts from intelligence agencies and DOD. So we're ramping up our horsepower on the investigations and operations side for Vets for Child Rescue. And our operators, the guys that carry the weapons and kick doors and run joint operations with law enforcement, typically tier 1 level guys from Delta, DevGru, and other units. A lot of them a mix of military, spec ops, and law enforcement. So we like running the joint ops with law enforcement. Job one is expose the threat, right? Change the culture to be a hostile environment for the predators and a safe one for the children. That's job one. But number two is take the predators off the streets and convict them, because they rape an average of 70 children each. They don't stop. They'll rape children until they get caught. Some never get caught. They rape and destroy hundreds of little lives because the predator wants to be in a position where he has access to children that's unsupervised, like a scout leader, like a Sunday school teacher, and things like that. And so they work themselves into access, and they destroy a lot of lives. And the average number is 70 each. So everyone that we arrest and convict and put in prison represents a list of children that won't be raped in the future from that predator. And that feels very good. So we've got 23 predator arrests so far and warrants with 100% conviction rate. And we're just getting started. So we're excited about that aspect of our operation too.
And this is how big the issue is, because this is, like I said, I go down many different rabbit holes on this show, and people need to talk about this. But on Twitter, I had this, she's a comedian and a podcaster, Chrissy Mayer, and she was on, she's been on my show, and she, a few times on Twitter, posted, why are these accounts still on Twitter when you're censoring other people? Why? And there were child porn accounts. And there's people in the comments, tweeting saying, I've already reported this. Why is this still up? I've already reported this. Why is this still up? But yet people who are saying very mild things, maybe just opinions you don't like, or the Hunter Biden story from I think it was the New York Post. It was from an actual, respected publication, somewhat respected. I don't know if any publications are respected, but, and yet you censor that, but you leave these accounts on there. There's also a comedian, he passed away now, but Barry Crimmins, I don't know if you know who he is, but he was a comedian. He quite famous, like East Coast comedian, and he was also a part of a documentary where he told his life. And a part of that documentary, and I can't recall what the documentary is, but if people look up Barry Crimmins, they can find it. It tells a story of how he exposed the AOL thing. So people were going back and forth and sharing child porn in AOL chats, and AOL knew it. And because they were making money, they didn't care. And he ended up exposing it in a court of law. And also, there's so I briefly talked about the Franklin scandal. It's a very important scandal. It's very similar to like Epstein, and it's linked to hiring politicians. And I mean, this stuff has been going on forever. You look at Dennis Hastert, who was Speaker of the House. He linked to pedophilia and raping boys. And there's a documentary called Conspiracy of Silence about the Franklin scandal, which you can still find some rough cut online. But this is an important documentary exposing a important topic, and of course it was never aired, and they end up you end up finding some unedited version of it still online, some poor quality one. But this stuff does happen. The Penn State thing, there's a district attorney that some people think had a very mysterious death that was looking into this before it was completely public and exposed. So this stuff does happen, and I could go on and on. I mean, you look at the DC Madam, all everything.
Fleiss.
What's that?
Heidi Fleiss.
Yeah, linked to all these politicians who were getting prostitutes. I'm not necessarily saying they're all young, but I'm saying that there's a lot of sexual stuff that happens behind the scenes we're not aware of. And in some cases, you look at like during when Bush Sr. was vice president, he was linked to the call boys. I don't know if you remember that story. I think I wrote down his name. It was Craig Spence. And he was one of the guys who eventually he committed suicide allegedly in a Ritz-Carlton hotel in Boston. But he was one of the guys that was bringing in some call boys late into the White House at night, and politicians were linked to that. You have Laura Silsby and the Clintons. I mean, if people aren't familiar with that story, she gets arrested bringing like 30 or 40 undocumented children from Haiti to Dominican Republic, trying to cross the border. She gets arrested. Bill Clinton gets involved and says, I don't know what he did. He struck a deal, and then basically she gets 6 months, for this. And then of course Epstein. You look at Epstein. I mean, that story, the fact that Acosta openly says like this was way above my pay grade. That's why he got the sweetheart deal. That's why he got the little smack on the wrist. Bill Gates lied about when he met him. I mean, so many people lied about. I mean, Bill Clinton flew on his jet a bunch of times without Secret Service and was in his flight logs. And then Alan Dershowitz. So it's like and this is I'm literally just scratching the surface. I mean, when what really bothers me is that all this stuff is real. Everything I said, you can look it up. Well, you used to be able to look it up. Now Google will probably suppress it. You have to go to DuckDuckGo or go to BitChute or Odyssey Library, any of the other alternatives to find any decent research. But if you look at these articles and you look at these stories, these are all real stories that really happened with real people and real victims. But you talk about child trafficking, and I almost feel like it was a media attempt to kind of poo-poo the whole topic or make it look like everybody who talked about it was a conspiracy theorist, because they started connecting. Like when Epstein's story came out, for a little bit, like we mentioned, people started taking the topic seriously, but then they started linking the whole Q thing and the Pizzagate thing to it. And literally every time you talk about child trafficking, they think you're this conspiracy theorist who believes all these crazy things. Well, the Pizzagate thing, okay, maybe that there was nothing going on at the pizzeria, but where there's smoke, there could be fire. And there was some really, if people really looked into it, there was some really creepy shit on the owner's Instagram. And as a parent, like they have kids in very, provocative positions and poses that I would not be comfortable with my child being online like that. So there was some weird things about that whole story. But regardless, if there was nothing there, you don't completely just disregard anybody who talks about child trafficking. And I do you think that was a intentional position or an intentional scheme to kind of just get people to not talk about that story or talk about that topic and kind of just pigeonhole everybody who does into that conspiracy theorist, cover them with that conspiracy theorist blanket?
there's several layers to child trafficking, pedophilia, the sex with children, and the power, if you will, that comes from it. And I say power because a percentage of it is, it's all about political power. Used to, in years past, a politician would just need to be caught having an affair with another woman to ruin his political career or to be blackmailed. That grew stale. Our society grew numb to that morally. And so it had to be, after a while, a homosexual affair. Then you catch a, guy having a homosexual affair. That's shocking and repulsive. So that would do it. Then they could, the dark side, the criminal cabal, they could control him if they could demonstrate that they could compromise him and expose him for having a homosexual affair. And then we grew on to that. It didn't really matter so much anymore. Now we're down to kids. And so if you look at the Epstein, Maxwell hit team, if you will, it's nothing more than an intelligence community hit job, servicing the world's elite and powerful and filming them doing God knows what with underage girls and boys, which is utilized as leverage. It's called a brownstone operation in the intelligence community, but it's essentially just a blackmailing scheme because they've got photos and video of these targets doing unthinkable things with children. And so that's why they take them to these islands and the mansions and they're neck deep in hookers and blow and whatever they want. Next thing you know, they're upstairs in the master bedroom that's wired, with who knows how many cameras. Everything in there is filmed. So after that politician works for the cabal. He no longer works for you or me. That's why you and I can vote for something, and someone that ran on a certain ticket is acting contrary to that. If you take a politician that is acting bizarrely now and completely backwards from his party and what he ran on and the promises that he made, he's compromised. He's on video raping small boys or small girls by people like Epstein and Maxwell. Make no mistake, Epstein and Maxwell were not the only game in town. There's a lot of them. And so that's one thing. It's the political blackmail. There's also the sexual perversion. Some wealthy people will just pay to do that because they're sick. There's the financial aspect of it. So, Hollywood, and not just the film and television industry, but pop music, the music industry is just as rancid. So if you offer up a child into those industries, they will be raped. And unless you're standing there holding them by the hand and going to every room with them, they will be raped because that's what it's all about. They're gatekeepers. There's the casting couch. I know too many people in both industries that have dealt with it and shared everything about it with me. So you've got Harvey Weinstein and those kinds of creepers. Epstein and Maxwell. You've got the perverts in DC doing all of it. So there's all these people that have a foot into the pedophilia and child trafficking realm, as does big tech. And if you look at who own our mainstream news media now, you trace it up to 6 entities and really kind of only 4 at the very top. What are their worldviews? What model of governance do they subscribe to? And what morality is that about? And they're all very radical leftists. That's essentially Marxism is what they want. It's the worst, most hostile form of communism. That's what they're after. And there is no United States in their model. So they mean to break our culture. And if you look at the 45 goals of what the communists wrote down and what was read before Congress in 1962, that we knew their game plan, it was to break down the morality of our country. And this is just one aspect of it. Demoralize the country, divide and conquer, and destabilize the United States for hostile takeover. And they were talking about things like condoning rioting as a legitimate form of grievance for special interest groups. This is back in the late 50s and early 60s. We knew this. And now we look at it and it seems like a fresh new thing, but they've been building that weaponization and attack on our culture, on our patriotism, on our religion, on our, on our flag and our family unit, the things that have made America really rock strong and undefeatable by foreign hostile countries. They decided that they were going to take us over without firing a shot. And that's essentially what they're doing now. So is big tech on board with normalizing child rape? Absolutely. Is the mainstream news media and their owners, are they out to cover it up? They absolutely are. You just have to watch what they do. Don't take my word for it. Just sit back and observe, and you'll be like, wow, man, Craig's right. That's obviously that it's exactly what they're doing. So it's no longer a surprise once you know that they don't mean to benefit the American citizen. They don't mean for our best interest to be served. They mean to break the United States so that we could be fit into their globalist model that they want. And so a lot of Americans still sleepwalk and don't realize the hostility being leveled at us. And child trafficking is the absolute epicenter, though, Ricky. It's the core, the rancid string or glue that ties Epstein and Maxwell to big Hollywood and DC and all these criminal elements, even Mexican drug cartels and the local gangbangers, MS-13 and all the Crips and Bloods. They're all involved in its evil, and that's their realm. And the American citizen is largely unwitting. So I am trying to sound the alarm and go, look, Americans, we have to understand what's being done so that we can safeguard our children and safeguard our freedom from it, because it's what they're doing is ugly, man.
Yeah, and some people don't realize that there's no way some of these politicians don't know what the hell is going on. I mean, obviously there's some that are involved, and then there's some that know what's going on and turn the other way. I mean, I had, and in Hollywood, it's the same thing. Weinstein, I think it was the Obama daughters who actually interned for Weinstein. So think about that. I mean, you can look it up. They actually interned for Weinstein. So Obama trusted this guy with his girls. So obviously he's close enough to do that. So there's no way he didn't know what was going on. Same thing with like the Bill Cosby thing. Like, it was an open secret. Everybody kind of knew what was going on. Hollywood's the same thing. The documentary, A Open Secret. I had one of the people involved in that documentary. I think his name was Matthew Valentes. He was a Hollywood attorney and involved in a documentary. And I mean, this is a open secret. These parties with young boys and everybody kind of knows what's going on, and nobody wants to speak out because they're worried about their career, or they're worried about whatever. And which really, makes me curious about, their moral compass or their lack of. So I can't relate to people like that. That's why I love hearing your story. It's a nonprofit organization. You're motivated by trying to leave the world a little better than you received it. And it's same thing like why people like myself start podcasts or journalists get into journalism. Because it's not because it's a good career choice, financially. It's because it's you feel like you have to do something, and you have to start you're going to attempt to start your own little ripple of change. I mean, that's why I called it the Ripple Effect Podcast, because I would really want to inherit this idea in people's minds that we can all make a difference. We can all do something. But to go back before I forget, because this is a interesting documentary that is somewhat linked to what we're talking about. As you can tell, I'm addicted to documentaries. I'm constantly bringing them up. But there's a documentary called Tickled. You ever hear of it? And it was this is linked. What's that?
I don't think I've heard of that one.
Yeah, so Tickled is a very interesting documentary, and this is also linked to this topic because it's about rich and powerful people having sick fetishes, And so what happened was that this I think he was a journalist / filmmaker, and he was looking into this story that seemed kind of silly about this website that has like people getting tickled, right? And that's all it was. It was like this website where it's like, who's into this crap? And then little by little, as he looked into it, the more he looked into it, he was starting to get death threats, like, stop going down this rabbit hole, don't look into this. And then he ends up, and this is not somebody who's like an investigative, hard-hitting journalist. This was just like a documentary filmmaker who was just looking for an interesting story. and didn't know what he was getting himself into. Ends up uncovering that these rich and powerful people were paying college boys. I think it was exclusively boys. And I think it was college, maybe high school, but definitely college boys who needed money. Gave them a bunch of money to just film them getting tickled. And then what would happen is that if they ever wanted to stop, they would blackmail the children by saying, "Hey, if you stop, I'm going to post this everywhere online." So now they had the kids blackmailed, because I mean, what kid doesn't want, what kid, one, doesn't want money, and then two, who wants to deal with the humiliation of everybody, seeing these videos that they thought was just like harmless, like, hey, you'll give me a couple grand to tickle myself in my boxers or whatever it is. It seems pretty harmless, and even if it is a little weird, you figure like, hey, I'm in college, I need some money, this seems kind of harmless. And so he ends up uncovering this whole thing that's linked to some very rich and powerful people in this whole like underground network. It was really interesting. The documentary didn't get as much attention as I thought, because I'm like, this is really fascinating, like how many of these type of things are going on. And the thing about the internet, it's like when you search stuff, you're seeing all the mainstream stuff. Like there's some deep dark places of the internet that none of us go to, and probably don't want to go to. And there's very creative ways of these transactions happening and communicating with one another, and symbolism and the code words and all this stuff. That's why when to Podesta emails, all the weird things that are going on, I mean, people had reason to believe there's something weird going on, because that wasn't language that normal people use. And if you were doing something really suspicious, that's what you would do. You would use code words like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my first wake up call to how hostile everything was geared against getting the truth out, making my own ripple effect, was when I first started trying to rally up money, just doing basic crowdfunding to film a documentary. I didn't want to initially, I didn't set out to found a nonprofit organization whatsoever. I just wanted to film a documentary and alert the populace and ruin the secrecy for the predators, and maybe live the rest of my life, doing whatever else I thought I needed to do. And I started trying to crowdfund, and all the big tech crowdfunding platforms started really going off the map of anything that was acceptable, to jerk me around, to keep me from crowdfunding to film this documentary, just to expose this thing so we could safeguard children. I'm like, who's against safeguarding children? And that's when I started getting, people from the intelligence community looking over my shoulder saying, hey, Craig, you got groups panicking on the dark net that you're coming into this topic, and that you're not afraid, and that you can't be bought, and you're coming. And with your background and pedigree is kind of a problem there. They're not used to people not being able to be bought off. I'm like, well, I'm honored that they already know that they can't buy me, and I'm proud that they know I'm not scared. And so here I come. And meanwhile, we've already gotten ContraLand out to 90 million households, and we're about to go on another platform shortly and be larger than that. So I'm sounding that alarm. But man, I had about 500,000, about 500,000 followers combined on my different social media accounts. And just in the last several months, basically leading up to the election and just after the election, I saw a frantic desperation in big tech, the social media platforms, like never before. It was just reaching fever pitch. And, LinkedIn and Twitter just deleted my accounts. They claimed it was over posting COVID stats straight from the CDC's website. And I don't believe that. I don't think that's what it was about. I think enough people know that COVID is what it is, whatever their opinion is of it. I don't think I was that big a threat that I was going to ruin the COVID control mechanism for them, especially not quoting the CDC's own stats, right? So it was about the child trafficking exposure. They just needed an excuse. And so, man, I've seen that big tech is they're on the wrong side of good and evil. And especially, at least when it comes to children. And that's disappointing for me. It's sickening revelation. I feel sick in my stomach to realize these big powerful companies that control the narrative, how we speak, how we chat back and forth with each other. They are all about child trafficking, and they're very much against it being exposed and stopped. And that's an ugly revelation, but of course it's not going to stop me. Everybody's migrating. The patriots are migrating to newer platforms that are more friendly and less abusive. I mean, we're looking at a Sharia level censorship now, something like Soviet Russia would just absolute lockdown, or what they have in communist China. Why? Because China is the one buying off so many of our politicians, and it's no secret that there's a lot of our politicians that can be directly connected to billions of dollars in payouts through construction contracts from China, and all, the list is long. And so shame on the American citizens for not paying attention, because China are not our friends, and they mean to take over, and they're just playing the long game.
They don't have to take over. We're turning into them without even knowing it.
Well, they're taking over, but they're buying in. They're buying key leaders. If you look at their playbook, they've done it over decades, buying up more politicians, buying up more media, buying up more academia, who begin peddling their mantra, their narrative, and swaying our youth and our populace through the media to think more like, they can never, communism is never, taken hold by, like, we want hardcore communism. They always usher it in first, very gently, softly, sugar frosted, just like a creeper in the back of a rape van. I've got candy, they sugar frost it, saying, well, it's democratic socialism. It's for the little guy. Man, doesn't that sound pleasant? Everybody's like, hey, I'm for the little guy. And those people haven't stood in the communist killing fields like I have.
Yeah, it's
and other nations, and seen the genocide of over 100 million women, children, civilians lined up and exterminated, and government sponsored genocide campaigns under socialism and communism in the last century. That's why they've scrubbed that from our academic systems. Our youth aren't being taught about it, how things really work. Again, wisdom is understanding how things work. They're removing those things from our educational system, because our enemies are buying up the influence that they want. So our youth come through high school and even college still unwitting to what socialism and communism has actually brought across the world over the last century. So, man, the truth will set you free, but you have to learn this truth, and you have to make use of it for it'll set you free, because predators always want to take control and abuse those beneath them that they can. And that's all of this is about. It's just about power. It's about weak human character abusing whatever power or influence they can to abuse others, whether it's abusing you and I as citizens for absolute, dominance and control, or it's abusing children for a power trip or a sexual perversion. It's all bad. None of us are supposed to behave that way. We're supposed to be honorable and decent, and I believe every one of us is going to be judged, one day. And I'm not going to have a bad conversation on that day. That's just my personal decision. I live my life in a way that I'm going to be looking forward to that day. I'll answer for my behavior and my words. I'm not perfect, but man, I'm trying to do the right thing. And man, none of this would be happening if all these other people were. And I think I encourage more people to stand up and just behave in a way that don't be the jerk. Don't be the scumbag. There's 10 commandments. That should be commandment number 1. Don't be a freaking scumbag. If only more people would just set out not to be a total predator douchebag, so many things would just work better. So
yeah, and I think this whole COVID lockdown gave people kind of the green light to be jerks who just looking for a justification to be a jerk. They feel like they're the they're taking the moral higher ground, so they can get in a conflict with somebody who's wearing their mask on their chin or whatever it may be, and just, it just, they feel like they're justified. Oh, I can be a jerk now because I'm on the right side. I'm concerned about people. You're not concerned about people. It's like, well, I'm concerned about my fucking rights. I'm concerned
Yeah.
about giving them up for something, and don't get me wrong, I've had Mickey Willis from Plandemic documentary on. I've had plenty of controversial people on. People know where I stand on this whole COVID thing. And what's bothersome, you talked about the censorship. What's really bothersome, it doesn't I just had a article. His name's Dr. Eden. I think Eden's like Yeaden, something like that. He was a Pfizer, way high ranked in Pfizer. Went through this whole video spiel about what he thinks about the virus, what he thinks about the vaccine, all these things. And this guy is a established researcher with a hell of a resume, and yet sharing anything about that video or any article that's talking about his opinions gets suppressed. Anything that goes against the mainstream narrative gets suppressed. And yet on Twitter there's still child porn, and on Instagram there's half naked women everywhere, completely okay. The most provocative dancing and music or whatever, that's okay. But God forbid you share anything that goes against the mainstream narrative. And it's not about truth. It's not about science. It's not about the virus. It's about control, and it's about compliance. And I say it all the time. If I go around with a shield on my face, one of those silly looking shields, I'm accepted everywhere, even though we know that the shield doesn't do jack shit. I mean, it doesn't, besides force me to breathe in some extra carbon dioxide. But besides that, it doesn't do anything in regards to stopping the spread of some saliva or whatever. So it's about compliance. Same thing with a neck gaiter. I use a neck gaiter when I go somewhere and I have to wear a mask. I'll wear it underneath my nose. Nobody will say anything, that if I'm wearing a neck gaiter, even though we know it's not really, it's not really doing much in regards to stopping particles. But so it's about compliance. When Massachusetts, where I live, or you look at some of the rules in Chinafornia, over there in California, it's these rules are not about science. I mean, when a dictator Baker tells every Massachusetts resident that they have to wear a mask in public, regardless if you're with anybody, regardless if you're near anybody, regardless if you're driving or whatever, that's not about science. When
Right.
out of nowhere we just say, hey, we're going to go to 40% capacity, with no justification. There's no science. There's no research to back why you even went to 25% capacity in the first place, and now why you're letting it go, or why during the holidays, or really because of the election, why all of a sudden things got worse, even though the summer, everything, when you couldn't restrict people from leaving their house because it was nice out and all that stuff, people were having barbecues. I tell people, I'm like, what the fuck is the difference during the holidays when everybody's too scared to get together, or during the summers when everybody's getting together and people are like, oh, things are getting better? Nothing changed. Hospitals didn't get any more busier. If they did, it was natural and organic, because in winter seasons people get more sick. I mean, everybody knows viruses live longer and on surfaces longer in the cold, so that's naturally why people get more sick. But besides that, there's nothing changed. There's not dead bodies dropping like we're sold in April, because they're showing us these videos of China, of people dying in the streets. We were sold this idea that we had to stop this virus because look what happens if you get it. Now everybody knows, many people who got it, most people who probably listen to this probably had it. It test positive at some point using a bullshit PCR test, finding an insignificant particle of a dead virus, and yet, can you tell I get worked up about this? It's hard not to get worked up, because it's like
It's so damaging to everybody that you love, our country, our way of life. It's so damaging, and it's so bogus, and it's upsetting. So I don't blame you for getting upset about it. We're all upset, man. So you go on. I'll sit here and cheer for you while you go off.
But it's important. People need to get upset. And I know people have COVID fatigue, but it's like, you can't keep giving up your rights. We were sold that it was going to be a couple weeks, then it was this, and many of us already saw where this was going. Like, they just kept moving the goalposts. They kept moving. Why isn't there a national organization put together to study Texas or Florida, where they had minimal lockdowns compared to other states that had much more aggressive lockdowns? And why are those states not as bad as all the other states? Why isn't that priority one? Because nobody cares about getting to the truth. They care about pushing a vaccine on you. Nobody's telling you about your health, exercising, vitamin C, vitamin D. I mean, the fact that the gym isn't essential, like, exercising is essential for your health. And isn't that what we're supposed to be protecting? Our health. So this idea that it's not essential is silly. The idea that for many, many years, we've known that vitamin C is essential to help your immune system, keep it strong. We know that vitamin D is crucial for your health. And especially in New England, where most of us are vitamin D deficient. But yet during the lockdown, it was the first time in history that if you mentioned those things, you would get blocked or censored, or it was dangerous information. If telling people to take vitamin C is dangerous information, then you should arrest every Walgreens and CVS and every drugstore that sells, vitamin C, because apparently it's too dangerous to tell people to go purchase it. It's so ridiculous. Like and the reason I get worked up is because it's so obvious that it's not about a virus, and it's about the Great Reset. It's about remolding
Right.
society as we know it, and that people and what really makes me upset is the fact that I think some people know, but because their political team says, "Hey, I'm supposed to be on this side of this argument," then I'm going to defend this side of this argument. If the president, who I don't like, said, was making it seem like it wasn't that serious, and yet everybody else on the other side on my team said it is serious and he's not taking it seriously enough, then that's the stance I have to keep regardless of all the evidence came out. And I'm like, I keep telling people, I'm like, this isn't a political debate. This is about your rights. This is about having freedom. This is about traumatizing children. We talked about child trafficking, predators everywhere. I was just talking to a teacher recently who's a friend of my wife's, and she said something that actually I didn't even really consider. And she was talking about how she won't let her kids go to back to school until they don't have a mask mandate. And I'm like, well, that might be a fucking while, because I'm homeschooling my kids. And I was assuming, I'm like, yeah, the carbon dioxide. I'm like, the kids are breathing that all day. I'm like, they're probably throwing the mask in their backpack. It's picking up germs. We don't wash these things enough. Sometimes we're scattering. Like, do we have a mask? Let's just throw it on our face. We don't know what type of germs we're putting on our face. And she's like, no, it's not even about that. It's about the fact, if something happens to my child, if a predator does something, how the hell can that kid know for sure it's that adult? And you know how kids are. You can rearrange your memory. You can tell them, like, are you sure it was him? And all of a sudden they start having doubts, and all of a sudden a predator gets away because somebody just planted a doubt in his head because they were wearing a mask. So there's all these other issues that we're not even considering to stop a virus that not a year ago, if I said was a bad flu, everybody on Facebook would jump down my throat and say, how dare you? People are dying everywhere. And now I say, and they're like, yeah, but the old people, it's like, it's so silly what we've accepted as reality. It's crazy.
Nobody likes a hypocrite. And look at Fauci. How many things have you heard Dr. Fauci offer to the American people that are proven and known to help us, other than social distance and masks? Those are only two things and that inoculation, man. They want that vax, right? Get that vax. Speaking of big pharma, and tyranny there, and the corruption. So none of the things that boost the immune system, that cause people to be happy and strong and healthy, he's not promoting any of that. I've never heard him suggest to do anything that prevents this. I've talked to doctors that have said, hey, Craig, 95% of my COVID patients were catastrophically low in vitamin D3.
Yeah.
Just take D3. And vitamin C is a great immune system booster too. And so why isn't, Fauci admitting and offering up things that are common knowledge throughout the medical and health community? So I think people despise a hypocrite, no matter what side they're on. And I don't think you have to be a genius to look at this creepy Fauci clown and what's behind COVID and the way that they're abusing it. And like you admitted, and so eloquently, is moving the goalposts on us. We achieved something. We're supposed to, okay, if we mask up, then we should be able to go back to work, right? Oh, no. Well, then why are we masking if they don't work? Either social distancing and masking works or it doesn't. Oh, yeah, but it's just nothing. There's no solution other than this shutdown, an indefinite shutdown, indefinite. They never encourage people to keep the faith and stick together. They always want divide and conquer and doom and despair and give up and let the economy crash and don't go to work, don't go to school. It's just all negative. And then once you understand the communist playbook, you realize, I see exactly where they're going. I've never been, since this whole COVID thing came out, I've never once been surprised, because I already knew where they were going, because I've got their playbook and everybody else can too. If you look at the Frankfurt School and the studies that have come out of that, you look at Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, you look at the 45 goals to destroy the American culture for hostile takeover, you look any of those things up, you consume them, you'll understand exactly what these people are up to. They're about one world global system that caused them to be in absolute control and everybody else to essentially be a type of pathetic, underling slave. And that's it. And once you realize that's where they're going, you won't be surprised anymore. But we do need to alert each other and start pushing back big time. Otherwise, it'll be so far, and it may already be, to where we won't even have the ability to effectively fight back, because they'll continue disarming the American populace. They'll continue separating. They'll continue locking down communications to a greater and greater degree, and travel. They'll continue locking it down until we realize, oh man, our hands are tied behind our back and we're in a box, so to speak, figuratively speaking. So
Yeah,
it's an ugly agenda. We just have to realize that's not what we want. We outnumber them and we outpower them if we will only just assert ourselves righteously. And we need to start coordinating, start communicating and collaborating and planning and pushing back and getting their rancid claws out of our beloved USA and get their clutches off of our protective Constitution and start reasserting ourselves and reliving and enjoying our freedom and liberty again, because they are out to destroy everything, and they've gotten pretty darn far.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people listening who want to support your efforts, they want to check out the documentary. Where are the best places to contact you, to support your nonprofit, check out the documentary and all that stuff?
Yeah, right now you can go to ContraLandMovie.com online. Type in ContraLandMovie.com and it'll pull right up. We've got our own website with it hosted right there. You can watch it free of charge. It's a quality 90-minute documentary, and we spent just over 3 years filming it, and it's empowering. And that's what I mean for everybody to see. Please share it and post it everywhere you can, and send it to the most powerful people and those with the biggest voice that you know. It's only to help children. That's what it is. Nobody can have a problem with this and admit it, because it's a good faith public service alert. And then to support our mission, you can go to vets4childrescue.org. Again, that's vets4childrescue.org is our website. And we've got a lot of empowering information on there. We've got tools to help you safeguard your own children. There's a drop-down menu on how to write your elected officials and demand stronger enforcement against the predators, and protections for the children, which we all agree on and need. And you can buy handsome merch there and support our team and our mission. And you can donate, because we are a 501c3 nonprofit org. We do everything we do. We run our operations and everything that we do just based on private donations that help us go after the bad guys and safeguard the children. So there's donate buttons there, and you can see our board of advisors and media links and things like that. So it's a wealth of information, and we just appreciate people coming and visiting and supporting the mission, because together we are what we can't be alone.
I love that.
We can create a society that defends children.
Yeah, that's and the status part is, and I think I've heard you say this on a past interview, is that a lot of times the predator what was a victim, and so if you don't stop it, it becomes a cycle where you get these traumatized children who end up eventually becoming predators, which create more predators and create more predators, and it's this vicious cycle. So it's I've talked about this on other shows, just how sad that whole transition is, where you at one point you're the victim, and then another point you're the predator, causing the same trauma that you had to deal with. And so yeah, it's a sad topic, but we need people like you who are willing to go out there and talk about it, and really be fearless. And these other real quick, because I know I suck at saying goodbyes, but there's other alternative platforms like Odyssey and Library, which Jeremy, I host this other show called the Union of the Unwanted, which is like this big roundtable conference call and it really was sparked by getting a bunch of people like myself, podcasters, researchers, people who are being censored, getting them together and try to talk about our issues and support one another, and also talk about alternatives. And some of the alternatives is like Odyssey and Library. Jeremy, the guy who created it, is a very much a libertarian, open source type guy who believes in no censorship. So definitely check that out. BitChute is good too. You're seeing a lot of people go there. Float is another one. Rockfin seems to be another place where I just started a show on there. They're really supporting alternative media. So it's really important for people to go to these other spots, because if you do want to look into this topic or any of the things that we talked about today, it's almost impossible on YouTube. And as long as I'll put your documentary and the links you mentioned in the show description, so people can find it and go to those places and support your work and connect with you. But yeah, if anybody's interested, definitely check out alternatives, because you're not going to find a lot of these stories on Google. It's just not going to happen. So
yeah, YouTube kills everything, as does Twitter and Facebook. I mean, even Instagram's deleted 4 of my accounts without excuse or explanation or apology. I even put together, because I'd been a federal criminal investigator, I put together basically a courtroom case file just demonstrating the facts, and snail mailed that and made them sign it, registered mail to Instagram headquarters, and said, hey, look, here's what happened to my account. Please reset it. You've deleted 50,000 followers, and now you're deleting my new accounts. Every time I get up to about 5,000, you're deleting those too. Like, what's going on? I haven't violated any community standards. They never even answered, man. They signed for a package that articulated exactly what the problem was, and they just didn't care. So it's like children, like juvies running these corporations. They don't have any accountability. There's no professional oversight or anybody causing them to answer for their behavior. They just do whatever they want. So yeah, we need to migrate to friendlier platforms, man.
I know so many people that overnight their YouTube channel just got completely eliminated. I mean, I had Del Bigtree on my show. iTunes wouldn't play it. I know he got completely removed from YouTube. His show, The High Wire, completely removed from YouTube. But yet, so this guy is too dangerous. But yet, we just got rid of the mandatory flu vaccine for kids in Massachusetts. Well, guess who the fuck did that? Del Bigtree's nonprofit organization, ICANN. So this guy is too dangerous for the public, but yet in a court of law made something happen that actually protected children. So it just look at that. And the crazy thing, all the stories in Massachusetts when they were talking about getting rid of the flu vaccine, none of these mainstream publications linked him to this whole case. Nobody linked his nonprofit organization to what happened. So everybody just knew that, hey, look, they got rid of the flu vaccine. Which is another example of how non-logical any of this is. It's like we're supposed to be fighting the coronavirus, and out of nowhere, you're just mandating a flu vaccine that has nothing to do with anything besides putting more money in the pockets of big pharma. But, and all of a sudden, it's gone. And all the poor parents who end up having to give their kids a non-necessary vaccine are now like, well, what the fuck, man? I just gave my kid a vaccine that now, if I just waited, I wouldn't have to. So it's the censorship thing is a huge issue. But to end it on a positive note, I do think when one door closes, another one opens, and I think because it's gotten so over the top, people don't care how convenient it is to have a little app on your phone, or how quickly it loads, or how nice the app looks. It's getting to the point where they're like, you know what? Even if this alternative isn't as good as the other one, at least I'm supporting somebody who's gonna, who's for free speech. It's not going to censor people, and they don't have a political agenda, which I think is important.
Yeah, I do too. I'm seeing the same type of determined migration to greener pastures, and I condemn those that silence the American voice and silence truth. Look, if you're frantically deleting and silencing the truth, you're on the wrong side, guys. If you work for a big tech company and you're silencing people that are sharing truth out there, shame on you. You're betraying everybody that you love, and it's ugly and it's disappointing to see. But yeah, I celebrate people, and this is a healthy thing. It's they're crashing the ship into the rocks so blatantly that even the most numb sleepwalker, can see it now. So the American people are waking up, and that's a healthy and a positive thing. And I think it's empowering, so that I welcome it, and I celebrate people, finding a place where they can have an open discussion. Because, man, that's about the most primary thing our founding fathers wanted when they come here. They wanted freedom to express themselves and to stop, having the boot of tyranny crush their larynx and silence their voice. And so, the First Amendment is number one for a reason. It's very important. And I celebrate the will of the American people to remain free and find places where they can do that. And I welcome us to leave these hostile legacy apps behind, to collect rust and dust, and be shamed throughout the pages of history for the abusive platforms that they had become. Let them grow old in obsolescence.
Yeah, and I think it will happen. I mean, nobody thought that MySpace was going to fail, or any of the other fads that seemed like they were on top of the world for a while. Eventually, that people will move on, and eventually YouTube will just be cat videos. So that's about it. So, but
I welcome the day.
Thanks. Yeah, you seem more like a dog guy, so I can. But thanks again, Craig. I really appreciate your time. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, your work, your passion. I love these type of stories, and I'm glad I can help with exposing it. Once the show's out, I'll send you the links and all that stuff. All my stuff's open source, so you can post it, upload it anywhere you want. The idea is try to get the conversations out there as quickly and as far as possible. So
Okay.
so I'll send you everything once it's up and live. And like I said, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day, and also have a great weekend, which is right around the corner.
All right, great. You too. And thanks for amplifying the voice and the message, man. Keep having your positive ripple effect out there, brother.
I'm trying. We're all in this fight together. We're all doing our part.
I wish you all the best.
Hey, you too. Take care.
All right.